the footprint evidence, the casts that were recovered from the...
In October 1967, two men rode into the wilderness of Northern California and came back with 59 seconds of 16mm film that would divide the scientific community for nearly 6 decades. For most of that time, the debate seemed settled. Hoax, costume, publicity stunt, case closed. But in 2024, an artificial intelligence was given that same footage and asked to analyze it without assumptions, without career investments, without the institutional pressure to reach a comfortable conclusion. What it found has quietly shaken the researchers who commissioned the study, and almost nobody is talking about it. Hi, my name is Justine, and this is Uncovered Expedition, the film that refused to die. It was October 20th, 1967. Roger Patterson, a rodeo rider and part-time Bigfoot enthusiast from Yakima, Washington, and his friend Bob Gimlin, a skilled horseman and tracker, were riding along a dry gravel riverbed at Bluff Creek in the Six Rivers National Forest in Northern California. Patterson had been investigating reports of large, unidentified creatures in the region for years. He had even written a self-published book about Bigfoot in 1966. Critics would later use this fact to suggest the whole thing was a calculated stunt. A man obsessed with Bigfoot conveniently films one. The timing is suspicious, they said. What happened next, depending on who you believe, was either the most significant wildlife encounter in recorded history or the most elaborate piece of wilderness theater ever staged. Their horses spooked. Patterson grabbed his rented 16mm Kodak camera, fell off his horse, scrambled to his feet, and began filming. What the footage shows is a large, dark, bipedal figure walking along the opposite bank of the creek, crossing a sandbar and disappearing into the tree line. At one point, the figure turns and looks directly at the camera. That moment, frame 272, later known as the Patty frame, became one of the most analyzed images in the history of cryptozoology and one of the most debated images in the history of film itself. The figure appears to be female. It walks upright with a distinctive fluid gait. Its arms are longer than a human's in proportion to its body. Its shoulders are enormous. Its entire frame is covered in dark brown hair, and it moves with a confidence, a purposefulness that struck early viewers as deeply unsettling. This was not something lumbering or stumbling. It was walking like it owned that forest. Patterson and Gimlin brought the footage back to civilization, and immediately the world wanted to see it. It was shown on television. Scientists were consulted. Anthropologists looked at it. Within weeks, 2 camps formed, and they have never reconciled since. Camp 1 said this was genuine wildlife footage, possibly of a previously undiscovered great ape or hominid species living in the Pacific Northwest. Camp 2 said it was a man in a gorilla suit, and Roger Patterson was either lying or delusional. Those 2 camps existed in 1967. They still exist today. And for most of the intervening 57 years, the conversation never moved beyond that binary. Here is what almost everyone agrees on, regardless of which camp they occupy. The film has never been definitively proven to be a hoax. That fact alone is remarkable, and it is the reason this story refuses to die. 60 years of failed debunking. The skeptical case against the Patterson-Gimlin film rests primarily on one argument. The figure is a man wearing a costume. It sounds simple. It should be easy to prove. For nearly 6 decades, people have been trying to prove it and failing in ways that are genuinely instructive. The most famous debunking attempt came from a man named Bob Hieronymus, who in 2004 claimed he was the man inside the suit. He said Patterson had paid him to wear a specially constructed gorilla costume and walk in front of the camera at Bluff Creek. His story got enormous media attention. It seemed like case closed, finally. Except Hieronymus could never produce the suit, could never demonstrate the walk, could never provide any corroborating evidence beyond his own testimony. And critically, the man he claimed made the costume, a Hollywood costume designer named Philip Morris, gave an account of the suit's construction that forensic analysts said would not produce the movement patterns visible in the film. Thus, here's where it gets interesting. Multiple Hollywood costume designers and special effects professionals were consulted over the years. including people who worked on major studio productions with million-dollar budgets, and they consistently said the same thing. They could not replicate the figure in the Patterson-Gimlin film with the materials and techniques available in 1967. They could not replicate it with materials available today. The muscle movement visible beneath the surface of the figure, the way the gluteal muscles and thigh muscles appear to shift and flex as it walks, that level of surface articulation underneath a hair-covered suit was simply beyond what costume technology could achieve. This point was not made by Bigfoot believers. It was made by the people whose job it is to build convincing creature costumes. Then there was the biomechanical analysis by Dr. Dmitry Donskoy, chief of the chair of biomechanics at the USSR Central Institute of Physical Culture, conducted in 1971. Donskoy spent months analyzing the film and concluded that the gait, the stride pattern, the weight distribution were inconsistent with a human walking in a costume. His analysis was largely ignored in the West, partly because it came from the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and partly because the conclusion was inconvenient. Then Jeff Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, and one of the few credentialed scientists willing to stake his professional reputation on serious Bigfoot research, spent years analyzing the film and concluded that the biomechanics of the walk could not be replicated by a human. He published papers. He wrote a book. He was mocked by colleagues. Each serious attempt to prove the film was a hoax either fell apart under scrutiny or raised new questions it could not answer. Each serious attempt to prove the film was genuine was dismissed before it could be properly evaluated. The debate calcified. And for decades, nothing new entered the conversation, until the AI. What AI was asked to do in 2024, something changed in this decades-old debate. A team of researchers, including biomechanical engineers, forensic imaging specialists, and computer vision experts, conducted the most comprehensive technical analysis of the Patterson-Gimlin film ever attempted. And I want to be clear about what that actually means, because people throw around words like comprehensive and groundbreaking so often they stop meaning anything. This was not a group of enthusiasts huddled around a laptop, pausing and rewinding a YouTube upload and pointing at pixels. These were credentialed scientists using tools that simply did not exist in any previous generation of this conversation. Photogrammetric reconstruction, which extracts precise three-dimensional measurements from two-dimensional footage using environmental reference points. Neural network pattern recognition, trained on thousands of hours of documented human and non-human primate locomotion. Three-dimensional skeletal mapping built from a film that Roger Patterson shot while running and slightly panicking in a California riverbed, and machine learning algorithms capable of detecting surface deformation patterns at the subpixel level, meaning movement happening beneath the surface of whatever is covering that figure, whether skin or suit. That last capability is important. Remember it. The methodology here was systematic in a way that every previous analysis simply was not. Rather than asking human analysts to look at the footage and offer their interpretation, which is inherently subjective and inherently vulnerable to confirmation bias on both sides, the AI was fed the Patterson-Gimlin footage alongside enormous comparative databases of known movement patterns. Human walking at various speeds, various body types, various physical conditions, chimpanzee locomotion, gorilla locomotion, orangutan locomotion. The algorithm was not working from instinct or opinion. It was doing what these systems do best, finding patterns and comparing them against everything it had ever been shown. And here's the thing I want you to hold on to as we go through the findings. The AI was not asked whether Bigfoot is real. Nobody asked it to solve a mystery or validate a belief system. It was asked a much narrower and much more useful question. Are the physical properties of the figure in this film consistent or inconsistent with a human being wearing a costume? That is a question with a measurable answer. That is a question science can actually address. The AI cannot tell us what the figure is. That is beyond what the data can support, and I will not pretend otherwise. What it can tell us with a level of precision and objectivity that no previous analysis has achieved is what the figure is not. And what it found was a set of answers that left researchers on both sides of this debate genuinely unsettled. There were three major findings. Each one is significant on its own terms. Together they form a picture that is very hard to look away from, and they get progressively more disturbing in exactly the order I am about to present them to you. So stay with me. The first finding, the walk. The most immediate thing anyone notices about the figure in the Patterson-Gimlin film is the way it walks. Even casual viewers in 1967 commented that the gait looked strange, too smooth, too fluid. Something about it felt wrong in a way people struggled to articulate. The AI articulated it precisely. Human bipedal locomotion follows predictable patterns. When a human walks, the center of mass rises and falls in a characteristic rhythm. The stride length correlates predictably with leg length. The knee flexion during mid-stance follows a specific curve. The foot strike pattern, heel to toe, creates particular pressure distributions that translate into visible postural shifts throughout the body. These patterns are so consistent across human subjects that biomechanical engineers use them as reliable identifiers. When you deviate from them, it is immediately detectable in the data. The figure in the Patterson-Gimlin film deviates from them, consistently, measurably, in ways that are biomechanically significant. The AI analysis found that the subject walks with a compliant gait, meaning the knees remain significantly more flexed throughout the stride cycle than human walking requires. This is not a small variation. The degree of knee flexion observed in the footage corresponds to a walking posture that, in a human being, would require extraordinary and sustained muscular effort. Studies of human locomotion have established that walking with this degree of knee flexion for any sustained period causes rapid muscular fatigue and is physiologically impractical as a normal walking pattern. You simply cannot walk that way comfortably over distance. Here is where the costume argument runs directly into a wall. If a human being is inside that suit, they are walking in a deeply uncomfortable, biomechanically inefficient posture for the entire duration of the footage. Every biomechanical marker in the footage is consistent with that posture being natural, effortless, the subject's default mode of movement. There are no compensations, no microcorrections, no moments where the stride pattern shifts in the way it would if a fatigued human were struggling to maintain an unnatural posture. The AI compared the stride data to thousands of examples of human subjects attempting to replicate the walk, which researchers had actually filmed and submitted for analysis. In every single human replication attempt, without exception, the algorithm detected compensatory movement patterns that were absent from the original footage. People trying to walk like the figure in the film cannot stop their bodies from betraying the effort it costs them. The figure in the original footage shows no such effort. It walks like an animal in its natural environment, relaxed, efficient, completely at home. And I know that sounds like the kind of thing a believer would say, but I am describing what the algorithm found in the movement data. This is not opinion. It is biomechanics. The second finding, the anatomy. The gait analysis was remarkable, but the second finding from the AI reanalysis is the one that made the biomechanical researcher I mentioned go quiet on the phone. Using three-dimensional surface reconstruction and neural network analysis of surface deformation patterns, the AI mapped the musculoskeletal activity visible beneath the surface of the figure throughout its walk. In simpler terms, it watched how the skin and hair moved and worked backwards to determine what muscles had to be firing to produce those surface movements. What it found does not match human anatomy. The most significant finding involves the gluteal muscles, the large muscle group of the buttocks, and their relationship to the figure's locomotion. In human walking, the gluteal muscles play a specific and well-documented role in stabilizing the pelvis and extending the hip. The pattern of gluteal activation during human bipedal walking is consistent and measurable. The figure in the Patterson-Gimlin film shows a gluteal muscle mass that is visibly larger than human proportions and that activates in a pattern the AI identified as significantly different from human gluteal function. The muscles appear to extend further down the thigh and activate earlier in the stride cycle than human anatomy would produce. This is not a subtle variation. The AI flagged it as an anatomical configuration outside the range of normal human variation. Then there is the sagittal crest. Frame-by-frame analysis of the figure's head profile shows a distinctive raised ridge along the top of the skull, consistent with the sagittal crest found in large primates like gorillas and orangutans. This bony ridge serves as an attachment point for massive jaw muscles in animals that require powerful chewing force. Humans do not have it. It cannot be faked with a costume without creating a visibly artificial profile. The AI analysis of the skull profile found dimensions and curvature consistent with a genuine bony structure, not padding or foam construction. But the finding that unsettled people most was the arm length calculation. Using photogrammetric reconstruction based on environmental reference points in the footage, trees, rocks, the creek bank, the AI calculated the figure's proportions with greater precision than any previous study. The arm length relative to total body height, what anatomists call the intermembral index, came back at a ratio outside the human range. Not slightly outside, significantly outside. The figure's arms, if the photogrammetric calculations are accurate, are longer relative to its body than any known human being and are proportionally closer to the great apes. Now, I hear you. A costume could include artificially lengthened arms. That is true. But combine artificially lengthened arms with the need to maintain a deeply flexed knee posture for the duration of the walk, while also producing anatomically accurate surface muscle deformation patterns consistent with a non-human musculoskeletal arrangement, and the costume theory requires a level of sophistication in 1967 that no one has ever been able to demonstrate existed. The third finding, the timeline. Problem. The gait findings were disturbing. The anatomy findings were more disturbing. The third finding is the one nobody saw coming. And this is the part of the AI analysis that has been most quietly discussed and most carefully avoided in mainstream coverage. Frame-by-frame analysis of the Patterson-Gimlin film at resolutions made possible by modern digital enhancement revealed something in the footage that had been invisible to every previous researcher for 57 years. Not because it was hidden, because it was too small to see without the right tools. In 17 frames of the original footage, the AI detected micro-expressions. Specifically, in the moment when the figure turns to look at the camera, the facial region of the subject shows movement patterns consistent with facial musculature activation beneath the surface covering. The algorithm identified contraction patterns around the orbital region, what we would call the area around the eyes, that correspond to the muscle group humans and other primates use when registering threat assessment. The expression, if you can call it that, is not random movement. The AI identified it as a specific and coherent neuromuscular response to an unexpected stimulus, namely the presence of the camera and the humans behind it. This matters enormously. A costume has no facial musculature. A mask does not flex in response to stimuli. It's what the AI detected in those 17 frames is a living face, reacting to what it sees. Not dramatically, not in a way any human analyst had ever noticed, but measurably, consistently across multiple frames, with the coherence of genuine biological response rather than the random movement of inanimate material. And here's the detail that keeps researchers up at night. The reaction is not fear. The analysis of the movement pattern suggests something closer to annoyance or assessment. The figure looks at the camera the way a large, confident animal looks at something it has decided is not worth panicking about. It registers the threat, evaluates it, and keeps walking. Whatever is in that film, the AI found evidence that it had a face, a working face. A face that looked at Roger Patterson's camera in October 1967 and made a decision. I will be honest with you, when I first read that section of the analysis, I had to put it down and go make a cup of tea. And I do not even drink tea. I drink coffee. I made tea. That is how unsettling this finding is. What the skeptics say, I promised you I would steel man the other side. And I'm going to do that properly because this story deserves intellectual honesty, and frankly, so do you. I did not come here to sell you a conclusion. I came here to show you what the evidence actually looks like when you examine it seriously. And examining it seriously means sitting with the uncomfortable parts, including the parts that push back against the AI findings. The mainstream skeptical response to analyses like this one makes several points that are genuinely legitimate and cannot simply be waved away with enthusiasm. The first point is one that anyone who works with AI should recognize immediately. Garbage in, garbage out. Any computational analysis is only as reliable as two things: the data the system was trained on and the quality of the footage being analyzed. The Patterson-Gimlin film is 57 years old. It was shot on a handheld 16mm camera by a man who had just fallen off a horse and was running across uneven terrain while filming. Since 1967, that footage has been copied, duplicated, transferred to different formats, digitized, enhanced, degraded, and redigitized so many times that questions about image integrity are completely valid. Every generation of copying introduces artifacts. Every enhancement process makes interpretive choices about what the image contains. So when the AI identifies surface deformation patterns beneath the figure's covering, or detects micro-expressions in 17 frames of footage, the skeptic's question is reasonable. Are those real features of the original subject, or are they artifacts created by decades of image processing? Are we analyzing the creature, or are we analyzing the noise introduced by 57 years of technological handling? That is not a dismissible question. It is an important one. The second point concerns the training data itself. The neural networks used in biomechanical analysis are trained primarily on human locomotion, and to a lesser extent on documented great ape locomotion. When the algorithm concludes that the gait pattern falls outside human norms, what it technically means is that the pattern falls outside the norms present in its training data. Those are not necessarily the same thing. An unusual human gait produced by a specific physical condition, an extreme athletic training background, or a deliberate and highly practiced performance technique might genuinely sit outside the algorithm's expected parameters without being biologically non-human. The AI flags the anomaly. It cannot tell us the cause. The third point is the one I find most sobering, and I want to give it the weight it deserves. No AI analysis, regardless of how sophisticated the tools or how credentialed the team, constitutes biological evidence. The only thing that would definitively and permanently resolve the question of what is in the Patterson-Gimlin film is physical evidence from a physical specimen. A body, a bone, a hair sample with intact DNA that could be sequenced and compared against known primate genomes. Without that, everything we are discussing, the gait analysis, the skeletal mapping, the surface deformation findings, all of it lives in the realm of interpretation, not proof. The AI makes the hoax theory significantly harder to sustain. It does not make the genuine animal theory proven. That distinction matters, and I will not pretend it does not. These are fair criticisms. Every one of them. I am not dismissing them. But here is what I need you to notice. The skeptical response, for all its legitimate points, consistently fails to address one fundamental asymmetry. After 57 years, the hoax theory also has no proof. There is no suit in existence. There is no credible account from a witness that has survived serious scrutiny. There is no demonstrated method by which those movement patterns could have been artificially produced with 1967 technology. The absence of proof cuts in both directions, and that matters more than most people in this conversation are willing to admit. The bigger question. Nobody is asking. Here is where I need to step back from the specific findings of the AI analysis and ask something that the data itself cannot answer. If the Patterson-Gimlin film is genuine, if it shows a real biological entity that is not a human being, what does that mean? Not in the immediate obvious sense of, oh, Bigfoot is real, how exciting, but in the deeper, more uncomfortable sense of what it means that mainstream science has spent nearly 6 decades refusing to seriously investigate that possibility. Think about what Jeremy Wade discovered in those final seasons of River Monsters. He realized that the show had been presenting a version of reality that was incomplete, that incomplete truths are more dangerous than no truths at all, because they let us believe everything is manageable, that the problems are not as bad as they seem, that we still have time. Science has a version of this problem. Institutional science has a profound and well-documented resistance to anomalous evidence. Not because scientists are dishonest, most of them are not, but because careers are built on consensus. Funding follows consensus. Reputation depends on not being the person who seriously argued for something the consensus had already dismissed. Jeff Meldrum spent 20 years as a legitimate anatomist, publishing legitimate research, and was consistently mocked by colleagues, not because his methodology was flawed, but because his subject matter was embarrassing. The moment you take Bigfoot seriously, you become the Bigfoot guy. And nobody wants to be the Bigfoot guy. But consider this. We have confirmed the existence of the okapi, a large mammal in Central Africa, only in 1901. We confirmed the existence of the giant squid from living specimens only in 2004. The coelacanth, a fish believed extinct for 65 million years, was found alive in 1938. In 1912, a Dutch colonial administrator found enormous bones on the island of Flores and confirmed the existence of the Komodo dragon, a 3-meter lizard that nobody in Western science had known about. Large, unknown animals exist. They are discovered regularly. The Pacific Northwest of North America is one of the most densely forested, least traversed wilderness regions on Earth. The idea that an undiscovered large primate could exist there is not scientifically absurd. It is scientifically plausible. What is absurd is the certainty with which mainstream science dismisses the possibility without serious investigation. The AI analysis did not create this problem. It revealed it. It showed that the most significant piece of alleged evidence in 60 years of this debate contains features that cannot be explained by the dominant dismissive theory. And the scientific establishment's response has been largely silence. That silence is what disturbs me more than anything else in this story. Roger Patterson died in 1972, 5 years after filming the footage that would define his legacy. He maintained until his death that what he filmed at Bluff Creek was real. Bob Gimlin is still alive. He is in his 90s now. He has told the same story for 57 years without significant contradiction. Make of that what you will. The 59 seconds of film they brought back from those California woods in 1967 has now been analyzed by human experts across multiple disciplines, by Hollywood professionals, by Soviet biomechanists, by American anthropologists, and finally by artificial intelligence using tools that did not exist in any previous generation of this debate. And after all of that analysis, after all of that scrutiny, the film has not been proven to be a hoax. The movement cannot be replicated. The anatomy does not match human proportions. The facial musculature responds like a living thing. None of this is proof that Bigfoot exists. I want to be precise about that. What it is evidence that the question has not been answered. And there is a profound difference between a question that has been answered and a question that has simply become socially uncomfortable to ask. The real story here is not about one piece of film. It is about what happens when evidence challenges the consensus, and the consensus responds not with investigation, but with dismissal. It is about the gap between what science claims to be a rigorous method for following evidence wherever it leads, and what science sometimes actually is, a human institution with human incentives and human blind spots. The AI did not prove the Patterson-Gimlin film shows a real creature. What it proved is that the people who have been telling you the question is settled were wrong. The question is not settled. It has never been settled. It has simply been ignored by the people with the tools and the credentials to properly investigate it. Somewhere in the forests of Northern California, in October 1967, something walked in front of a camera. It turned and looked at the man holding it. It registered his presence. It assessed him. It decided he was not a threat, and it kept walking. The AI looked back at it across 57 years and said, in the precise language of biomechanics and surface deformation analysis and skeletal mapping, we cannot explain this. I think it is time we stop pretending that we can. The monster in this story might not be in the forest. It might be our collective insistence on not looking. Not really. Not with the full weight of the tools we actually have. That is the most disturbing thing the AI found. Not in the film itself, but in how long it took anyone to seriously look. This has been Uncovered Expedition. I am Justine, and I genuinely need to go lie down. Need to go.